The headlines on RT: civilians flee the Iraqi city of Mosul as fighting between Iraqi forces and ISIL intensifies. Also this hour, top American officials reveal plans to, quote, govern the Syrian city of Raqqa once US-backed local forces liberate it from Islamic State. And the first polling stations open in the US presidential election as Democratic and Republican rivals Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump end their campaign rallies. Plus, a Munich neighbourhood builds a wall to separate itself from a new refugee centre, reviving bitter memories of the Berlin Wall. Hello, good afternoon. It's just gone 1 o'clock here in Moscow. You're watching RT International. Now, heavy fighting between the US-backed Iraqi forces and Islamic State terrorists in and around the Iraqi city of Mosul has left dozens of civilians injured and forced many to flee their homes.
احنا 11 نفر بس 3 طلعنا كلهم ماتوا كلهم ماتوا كلهم ماتوا كلهم ماتوا كلهم ماتوا كلها نايمة بالخلفية اربع مرات الصوب وين العدالة؟
Well, these are the latest pictures from the outskirts of Mosul, where injured civilians are being treated at a field hospital. Humanitarian organisations have warned that the US-led operation to retake the city could lead to dire consequences for civilians, as more than 1 million people are believed to be trapped there. They are being used by the terrorists as human shields. We discussed the situation with Helen Durham, Director of International Law and Policy at the Red Cross.
Well, from the ICRC's perspective, the use of military in the way that is being discussed creates and can potentially create significant humanitarian consequences. We need to, and we constantly remind all parties to the conflict that they have obligations to respect the laws of war, to make sure there's safe humanitarian passage for the many, many in need, and to ensure that civilians and civilian infrastructure is treated with the respect and safety. Yes, we're very concerned about the civilian death toll. I think tactics such as the use of human shields by some parties to the conflict are totally unacceptable, totally illegal, but it also puts obligations on other warring parties to plan their military operations and act accordingly to do everything in their power to reduce the suffering of civilians.
Meanwhile, the US-led coalition has carried out a series of airstrikes on the outskirts of the Syrian city of Raqqa. It is assisting local militia groups there who are trying to retake it from Islamic State, although the US has not been invited by Syria to intervene. We got comment from the US State Department.
How the liberation takes place, how we get local governance reestablished after the liberation. Our expectation, as has been elsewhere, is that outside forces would then withdraw.
As we establish local government, are you in effect dividing Syria? Is that taken away from Syrian sovereignty?
The reality is, though, as territory is liberated from Daesh, you've got to get some kind of governance back into these areas. We want to see a sovereign, intact Syria.
So the State Department then says that the US is expecting the locals to eventually govern in Raqqa. However, the American military's position is slightly different. Its top general has suggested that the forces may not be so local.
The coalition and Turkey will work together on the long-term plan for seizing, holding and governing Raqqa.
I don't think this is an appropriate language, and this is not a very good language. And indeed, it is not a language of peace. It is not a language of political resolution. It is not a language for reconciliation. It is a language for war. It is a language for making new maps to the Middle East, and which were called in the past time the maps of blood. And this indicates a very dangerous concept, and I am very much concerned and I am very much worried about the future of Syria and the future of the world, because as you see, they are intervening illegally in an independent state which has a government, elected president and a real authority on the ground, but they used ISIS as justification to occupy large areas of Syria for geopolitical goals.